Might have to, there we go. Okay, welcome. Thanks everyone for coming out tonight, both virtual participants via Zoom and what I'm going to call the studio audience here in Boise, Idaho. I'd like to thank my partner and Admiral Kate Didrikson here for managing the Zoom portion of this presentation, and my daughter Emma for helping to manage the audio and making sure things go smooth. Please hold your questions until we'll have a question break in the middle of the presentation and then one at the end as well. And Zoom participants, please just add your questions to the chat. Just a little disclaimer here about what we're here for. This is not a seamanship seminar. This is about how to prepare for cruising specifically in the San Juan and Gulf Islands. A little bit about my background and experience. I've been pocket cruising my Catalina 250 for the last 7 or 8 years. And I've made 7 annual trips in the summer to the San Juan and the Gulf Islands. And these trips have ranged, I think I started with 1 week the first time, and the next time it was 2, and it just was never enough. So last summer, I spent 6 weeks on my boat in the San Juan Islands. In addition to hauling my pocket cruiser over to the San Juans, I've also chartered in Croatia, Greece, and Mexico, and shortly in the British Virgin Islands and Desolation Sound. This is my boat. It's a 25-foot Catalina 250, certainly capable to handle most of the conditions, and I'll say most of the conditions experienced in the San Juan and Gulf Islands. An overview of the seminar. We're going to start with describing the cruising area, talk about marinas, state parks, moorings, places to launch, anchoring, and then some recommended equipment that you might want to have on board for cruising in the islands. Then we'll take a quick question break. And when we resume, we'll talk about trip planning, navigation, safety considerations, and then finish up with some fun slides and take some more questions. So the Salish Sea cruising area roughly extends from at the southern end at Puget Sound all the way up to the protected waters on the east side of Vancouver Island. And the San Juan Islands are situated pretty much smack in the middle of the Salish Sea. And these are probably the most protected and close together islands, and as such is one of the best places to begin a coastal cruising experience. Some of the logistics in terms of marinas, state parks, moorings, and anchoring. In terms of boat launching, there's quite a few places to launch a trailer boat. And there's also facilities that have slings that can lift your boat up and place it in the water. The most popular places to launch are Anacortes, Cap Santee Marina, Washington Park, which is also near Anacortes. Deception Pass State Park has a good boat ramp. Bellingham, John Wayne Marina in Sequim, and also Blaine Harbor. Just one thing to be aware of, parking, long-term parking is always an issue. There's cost and time limits, so that is something that you would want to check out before you make your decisions. There's also lots of marinas in the area, in addition to the state parks. The marinas, again, at Anacortes, Cap Santee. On San Juan Island, there's 2 really large marinas, Friday and Roche Harbor. On Orcas Island, there's West Sound, Deer Harbor, and Rosario. On Lopez, there's Fisherman's Bay. There's Blakely Island Marina, big marina at Bellingham, the Port of Sydney, BC, and then Bedwell and Browning, two different locations in Pender Island in British Columbia. Some of these marinas are really big, like this is Friday Harbor on San Juan Island, and some of them are smaller. This is West Sound on Orcas Island. Marina reservations are sometimes encouraged. Policies differ at different marinas. For example, Friday Harbor only reserves a certain portion of their slips, leaving a lot of them available for people that just come later. You just show up, Roche Harbor. A couple of years ago, they quit taking reservations at all. You just show up, radio in, and if they have one available, you're in. So different ways of doing things. The cost for a marina slip is about $2 a foot for LOA, length overall of your vessel, but it varies. And cancellation policies vary also. So reservations are a balance between having a place for the night, but also having some flexibility in case the weather shuts you out from getting there. So it's all part of the puzzle. There are a lot of marine state parks in the San Juan Islands. Anchorages are free. Mooring balls and dock space is less than $1 a foot for overnight moorage. And the facilities at these state parks include water, toilets, and onshore camping. We'll move on to some recommended equipment. I'll talk about items to have on board your boat to make your cruise more comfortable and safer. So this is a long list, and we're going to talk about all of these items. First and foremost, PFD, of course, and it's important to wear it. The water is not real warm in the San Juan Islands, and man overboard, person overboard is not a good thing. And your survivability and comfort will be enhanced if you're wearing a PFD. Probably the most comfortable, especially in the summer when it's warm, is an inflatable PFD. They're available from places like West Marine or other places. They're so comfortable, in fact, you hardly even know you've got it on. So, and that's a real enticement to wearing the thing. Next is navigation equipment, and I recommend at least 2 devices running a navigation program. And we're going to talk a lot about navionics, which is my personal favorite. Also, with these navigation programs like Navionics, it's nice to have a fairly large display device like a tablet. And then you can also have a backup device like your smartphone that you could have in your pocket or as a backup on board down below. And make sure you have a way to charge. Keep your devices charged. And have a paper chart for backup. Next on the list is a VHF radio. And we're going to talk about fixed base and handheld. Fixed base with a mast top antenna on your boat has the most power and the greatest range of transmit. And that's important in an emergency, but all those antenna connections can fail. And sometimes it's hard to know if your antenna is connected and your radio is actually working. So good practice is to do a radio check on low power every now and then on channel 16. And you'll get feedback from other vessels in the area and sometimes from the Coast Guard. And again, think redundancy. A handheld floating VHF radio is not only important for backup communications, but it's useful in other situations. Like if your crew's out in the dinghy and you need to call them to pick up another bag of ice or another 6-pack of beer or a loaf of bread or something. And then also, you'll want to grab this radio along with your ditch kit, which we'll talk a little bit more about in the unlikely event of you having to step off of your sinking boat. Another thing, unless you are in a marina or tied up to a state park dock, you're going to need some sort of dinghy to get off your boat and over to shore if you're anchored or on a mooring ball. And it's also useful for checking your crab traps, which is a definite benefit in the San Juan Islands is going crabbing. Kate and I used a 2-man tandem IK for many years, and it served our purpose just fine. Small, light, compact, and it can be towed behind a small pocket cruiser in all conditions. They're self-draining, whatever. A larger inflatable is more comfortable. Maybe you want to move up to get a little motor with it, but you really don't need those. And then again, worst case scenario, if you do have to abandon ship, that little IK or dinghy can serve as a life raft for the short time that it would probably take you to get rescued in the relatively busy waters of the San Juan Islands. So wind conditions, just like on an inland mountain lake here in Idaho, can change pretty quickly in the San Juan Islands. So reef points on your boat for your mainsail and your jib, we'll talk about jib in a moment, is a good thing to have. So not only have reef points, but know how to reef quickly and do it effectively. So while we're on the subject of reefing, when conditions get a little dicey, probably the last place you want to be is on the foredeck, dinking around with a sail. So if you can take some time in preparing your boat to lead your lines aft to your cockpit, it really enhances the safety of being on your boat in dicey conditions. So all lines led after your cockpit and label them so that in an emergency or when you're having to deal with stuff quickly, you can find them easily. And while a hank-on jib adds flexibility for you being able to change sails as needed, a furling jib is really, really a nice thing to have because you can furl the jib to help balance your mainsail when you're reefed. And again, all of that takes place from the cockpit, adding to safety. So I said this is not a seamanship or rigging seminar, but I would be remiss if I didn't mention the use of a preventer or a boom brake to prevent or help dampen accidental jibes. On my boat, I repurposed an old figure-8 rappel ascender that you can see, the black thing hanging off the boom, with lines that run through it are led forward through turning blocks, and then they run again aft to the cockpit to a cam cleat. And tensioning this line makes the boom very difficult to move, which is what you want to prevent any kind of accidental jibe. And earlier I mentioned the concept of a ditch kit. Heaven forbid, but if you do need to abandon ship, you should have a small ditch kit to take with you as you leave your vessel. And I put an example of one up here on the table that you can look at. Here's what it looks like in my ditch kit. I've got a small knife, a small air horn, signal flares, a small, cheap Baofeng VHF radio that I actually put in a vacuum bag to keep it waterproof, a flashlight, and an old-fashioned signal mirror. All these items fit easily into a small dry bag, and keep it in an easy-to-reach spot if you need to abandon ship. And if you're in Canada, this might be a good place to keep your passport as well. Air horns. In addition to the small air horn I keep in my ditch kit, I keep another one within easy reach in the cockpit. And these things are super loud. Think about avoiding collisions or making some noise during foggy conditions. And though not necessarily in the required or even maybe recommended category, I want to talk a little bit about AIS, or Automatic Identification System. AIS is a system that transmits your boat's location, speed, heading, and related information every 30 seconds, if you're traveling faster than 2 knots, to other vessels within VHF radio range. It interfaces with a NMEA backbone chart plotter on larger vessels, but for us pocket cruisers, it can also interface with navionics. If you and another vessel are on a closing course and there's a risk of collision, an alarm will sound. You can also simply touch the vessel of concern on your screen on your tablet. Navionics will display the vessel name, size, speed, heading, the closest point of encounter, and the time to that closest point. So the use of AIS requires a small transceiver mounted in your vessel. They're relatively low power, and they can connect to your existing VHF mast top antenna. They're not cheap, about 700 bucks or so, but they're worth their weight in gold during dense fog conditions. I sailed for 5 years without one. But a couple of years ago, I had an unexpected bad fog situation crossing Rosario Strait, and I was essentially running blind. And I decided I did not want to have an experience like that again. Most vessels in the islands have AIS, and they certainly turn them on in foggy conditions. So you can both see other vessels and be seen by them if you have this. And if you don't have AIS, but you have a smartphone and a cell connection, there's a website called marinetraffic.com that shows the location, direction, and speed of many vessels on the AIS network. So if you are fogged in and you look on your smartphone and marinetraffic.com and you see a vessel in your vicinity, for example, the Washington State Ferry Yakima here, you could maybe call them by radio and confirm that they see you on their radar. And I have done that before. Okay, back to more affordable items. I want to talk a little bit about the fire blanket. A small, inexpensive fire blanket, which is essentially a small fiberglass mat that's quick to deploy, can be used to blanket and extinguish a small fire quickly. Fires on boats are very scary, and they do happen. In fact, some of our system members here have had a fire on their boat. So fire blankets, cheap and easy. Another highly recommended, but again, hopefully never used item is a good quality cable cutter. And I am sorry about all this doom and gloom. We're going to get to better stuff soon. But in the highly unlikely event of a dismasting, the mast becomes a serious hazard in the water while it is still tied to your boat by lines and shrouds. You need to get rid of it quickly before it can put a hole in your boat. That requires quick access to a knife for your lines and quick access to a cable cutter for the steel shrouds and the stays. Extra fuel. Never, ever let yourself run out of fuel. Sometimes winds can be light in the summer in the San Juans, and you may find yourself motoring extensively, hopefully not against a current. Nor would you want to find yourself close to a lee shore with limited options if you can't start your motor. So always use non-ethanol fuel and consider additives like Yamaha Ring Free Plus, Stable, and Seafoam. Baby your engine. Carry at least enough spare fuel to get you to the next marina in case you run out. And while we're on the subject of fuel, it should go without saying, but I can't emphasize enough the importance of a reliable motor. Quite frankly, most of the issues I've seen with sailboats involve an outboard motor that won't start or won't keep running. Probably all of us have been in this situation that have sailed before. If you're in the market for a new outboard, do your research. Make sure you get an extra long shaft so the motor will stay in the water during big swells when your boat is pitching. And though, again, not necessarily recommended or certainly not required piece of equipment, I have really enjoyed having a tiller pilot on my boat the last few years. They maintain a constant compass course, and they make steering, especially when you're motoring, less arduous. But they are rather pricey, and they consume quite a bit of power. But if you are single-handed sailing, this is a good investment. Okay, I know that some of these things sound pretty daunting. Fog, fires, dismasting, sinking. But rest assured, good seamanship requires good preparation, right? And having the right stuff on board and knowing how to use it. But fact of the matter is, with good planning, most of your days are going to look more like this in the San Juan Islands. Okay, we've covered a lot of material here, so we're going to take a few minutes for questions before we move on to remaining topics of trip planning, navigation, and safety consideration. And I'll start with questions from the studio audience. So please maybe stand up and speak up loud so everybody, including me, can hear you. Questions?
Okay, I'll start. Okay, so I spoke to a guy the other day that has sailed up in the San Juans quite a bit. And he said to me that there is a book that gives the currents or not the tides, the currents and the power. Is there, because there's a lot of current up there, but he said, get to know this book. And I guess they update it every year or whatever. So could you speak a little bit about that?
Yeah, so the question was, is the availability of a book that describes currents in the San Juan Islands. Actually, I have heard of that. I don't use it. And we're going to talk about a couple of more digital options that I use for that. But I have said, even though you're carrying a couple devices for navigation, have paper charts. So that book would be a good thing to have as a backup.
It's $109.
$109, yeah, that's pretty pricey, yes.
How do you plan your cruise without that current chart book? That's how we do it.
That's in the next phase of the presentation. Okay, do we have any questions from the chat here?
That first part?
Yeah.
So, mooring permits and state park passes, is it worth buying them?
It depends on how long you're out.
I think it's 5 nights and you pay for a mooring permit.
I'm not sure that the state park pass
State park has to be different.
pays for mooring.
No, but it's $20 a night if you just go do it, but it's like $100 for an annual.
The question is about the state parks pass, but
and the mooring permit, or either, well, there are two of them. There's two different ones.
Okay, two different ones. More
for an annual.
Okay.
which means you only have to use it 5 times and it's paid for. And I don't know what the state park pass is. And then I was curious, have you chosen to sling launch versus trailer launch with your boat?
The question is sling launch versus trailer launch. I do not sling launch for a couple reasons. One, my bunks don't allow good placement of a sling. And secondly, my mast needs to be stepped using the trailer itself.
Yeah, you play radar reflectors ever?
Good point. And actually, I left that out of my presentation. Thank you. Yeah, a cheap radar deflector is another thing to use in foggy conditions. They're like about the size, they come in different sizes and shapes. Some of them are cylindrical, some of them are round. And you just hoist them up to the top of your mast with a spare halyard, and they make you much more visible to other boats that have radar. Good question. Thanks, Bill. Okay, any questions from our chat? We're going to check in with that.
How long can you stay at each park?
Oh, how long can you stay at each park? Anybody here? It seems like it's like a week or 10 days or something like that. So they do let you stay. Any more?
No.
Okay, great. We're going to get into the second part of the presentation now. And we're going to start with trip planning. So good preparation will help ensure a safe and enjoyable adventure. And trip planning can start well in advance of your trip. It can be actually enjoyable to sit down in front of your computer or a chart on a snowy winter day and start daydreaming about your upcoming summer cruise. So first decide when and where you want to go, and do you want to travel solo? Do you want to have a crew? Do you want to invite some buddy boats to sail with you? And part of the where question involves, where will you launch? Where will you park? And I mentioned parking is an issue and requires some research prior to your launching. There's usually time limits and costs associated with long-term parking. Another part of the question is, where do you want to go? Cruising distances and routes are part of the decision-making process, and there's an online website tool called Boater Cruising Distances in the Pacific Northwest that gives distances from selected locations to hundreds of other locations in the Pacific Northwest. Personally, I use the ruler path function in Google Earth to measure my planned route in nautical miles. When you decide where to launch and where you're going, you need to look into the timing of tides and currents. And you typically want to launch near a high tide, and that's dependent on the boat ramp that you choose to launch from. And tides vary on average about 11 feet per day between high and low in the Salish Sea. So tides are a big deal. There's numerous options for obtaining tide information, both online and a traditional printed tide tables. Knowing the expected tides not only helps you determine when to launch your boat, but they can also keep you afloat at night when the depth drops out from underneath you. A depth gauge is a really important instrument as well to keep you off the bottom. You use it in conjunction with tidal knowledge to know where to anchor, and I always keep an eye on it when sailing in shallow waters. A direct result of these large tidal variations, and coupled with the unique geography of the San Juan Islands and the Salish Sea, is strong currents. Currents can make or break your day on the water. They can help you out in a really big way to reach your destination early, or they can make you fight for every mile. That's why a knowledge of the local currents is a critical part of trip planning. My favorite tool for both tides and currents is a website, not an app. It's a website called deepzoom.com, deepzoom.com. It shows both a graphical representation of daily tide variations there on the right pane, as well as currents indicated by the little arrows on the left pane. And as you move the time slider, the current arrows change in magnitude and direction as the currents ebb, flood, and change directions. And here's why you want to get your timing right in areas with strong currents. This is Deception Pass with a flood current of maybe about 5 knots. These currents can cause large, dangerous eddies. So it's best to time your transit of areas that you know have strong currents during the slack, or maybe with no more than a knot or two of current, preferably in your favor. Unfortunately, Deep Zoom only covers the United States and requires an internet connection to use it. Another tool I use to answer the question about having some current information you can take with you is called PNW Current Atlas. It's available as a purchased app. I can't remember, somewhere around 25 bucks or less. And it does not need internet or cell connectivity. So changing the time and date controls at the bottom of the screen change the direction and size of the current arrows. And it also extends, as you can see, well north beyond the San Juan Islands into Desolation Sound. So because of the predictability of tides and currents, I start my trip planning way in advance. And I develop a detailed itinerary so I know where I need to be when and how to account for tidal changes when I'm anchoring. There's a great saying, however, that the worst thing to have on a sailboat is a calendar or a schedule. So flexibility is another factor. Just keep in mind that if you delay your schedule a day, for example, the timing of the tides and currents will be about 40 to 50 minutes later the next day. So in summary, good trip planning begins well before your trip. Decide where you want to go, figure out the launching and parking concerns. A review of tides and currents will help you in your decision-making process. Put together a tentative itinerary that uses currents to your advantage, but remember to be flexible. Moving on, now that we planned our trip, figured out our launch time, and we're ready to go, we're going to talk about navigation while on the water. Now I'm going to focus on my favorite preferred tool and a very popular one called Navionics. This app is available for both iOS and Android devices. An annual subscription provides you with a lot of information like updated charts, routing, real-time tides and currents, and something called active captain comments and reviews, which are supplied by the user community. Current annual subscription rate for US and Canada is 50 bucks. And when you create an account, you can run it on 2 devices simultaneously, and you can save your tracks and routes to the cloud when you have an account. I run Navionics on a Samsung tablet, this one right here, which I put on an articulated arm, which I got from Amazon, of course, mounted just inside the companionway hatch. You can swing it out into the cockpit in fair weather, or you can swing it inside if the weather is inclement or it's too sunny to see the screen well. I typically also run Navionics on my cell phone in my pocket as a quick backup. Navionics gives you a tremendous amount of utility and information. And I want to talk about this screen during an actual passage from Susha Island to Roche Harbor on San Juan Island. In the top left of the screen, it indicates the elapsed miles of this track, 11.1, the elapsed time, 1 hour and 36 minutes, the current heading, 257 degrees true, and your speed over ground, the big number, 8.8 knots. And I'll come back to that fast speed in a minute. In the top right of the screen, it shows the distance, time, and heading to the next waypoint along the route, indicated by the round blue symbol. And then the bottom right of the screen shows the distance, remaining time, and the estimated arrival time at the destination. So back to that speed for a minute. My Catalina has a theoretical hull speed of 6.3 knots. Yet the indicated speed here over ground is 8.8 knots. How can that be? One of the challenges, and at the same time, real advantages of sailing in the San Juan Islands are the strong currents in the area. In this screen, I have a water speed of 3.8 knots, but I have a ground speed of 7.8, indicating a favorable current of 4 knots. So when used to your advantage, riding these currents is like stepping on the moving sidewalk at the airport. Besides general wind and weather conditions, I consider timing these currents to be probably the most important factor in route planning in the San Juans. So the red arrows on the Navionics screen show you the direction and magnitude of the currents. Blue arrows indicate a decreasing current, red arrows indicate decreasing current, and red arrows indicate an increasing current. And the amount of fill in the arrow shows the relative strength of the current during its cycle. If you click on one of those current arrows, Navionics will display a graph with the current velocity and direction at that location. As you slide the timer, the arrows on the nautical chart also change. Unlike Deep Zoom, which is a website requiring an internet connection, this current information in Navionics is available offline on your device for a week ahead. Navionics also shows tide information. The little rectangles with the little triangle on them are tide indicators. If the rectangle is full, it's near high tide. The rectangle is red with an arrow on the bottom, the tide is falling. A blue rectangle with the arrow on top is a rising tide. And clicking on these symbols will also display a time slider graph of the tides, just like the currents. While underway, Navionics shows your current course as a red predictor line. Now, due to the currents that may slew you sideways, combined with leeway from wind, the compass heading of your boat, where your bow is pointing, may be way different from where you're actually going. You need to steer to the predictor line, not to what you see in front of you. This is really important and can be quite deceiving while you're underway in an area with cross currents. So graphically, this is what the concept looks like. Your boat's heading, where your bow and your compass are pointing, here is towards the top of the screen. Just replace that rowboat with a sail. However, due to the force of the current, and due to leeway from wind, your direction of motion, that is your bearing, is slewed way over to the right. The predictor line in Navionics would display like the red arrow in this graphic. A great utility in Navionics is automatic routing. You simply touch your desired location, destination, and choose Boat To. Navionics will select a safe route with waypoint and destination headings and time. Navionics also allows you to save your tracks at the end of a passage, and that's represented by the yellow line on this chart. You can name them, and they are automatically saved to the cloud, along with statistics for that sail. Navionics is not only a great tool when you're underway, but it also makes a great anchor watch. I start a track on my phone when I go to bed, turn the brightness all the way down, and when I wake up every hour or so at anchor, which you always do, I just glance at my phone, see that I'm within a reasonable swing radius, and then I go back to sleep. Another utility that I use is an anchor alarm app. This one is called Sail Safe. It makes a loud alarm if you move out of a preset radius after you anchor. And if you're in cell phone range, you can leave the app activated on one phone on the boat, and it can be set up to notify another phone that you take to shore with you. You will receive an alarm in case your boat starts to drift. Again, I rely on Navionics so much, I always run it on 2 devices while underway. And you can do this if you create an account, where you keep one device in reserve in case of an emergency. Redundancy is important. Even with that said, be sure you have paper charts and the skills to use them in case of some worst case scenario. While we're on the subject of navigation, I want to discuss some of the logistics of cruising in Canada, in the Gulf Islands. The Gulf Islands, the east coast of Vancouver Island, are also great cruising grounds and are still relatively easy to reach from the San Juan Islands or from Bellingham or Blaine. The general requirements to do this are to download an app called Arrive Can. Well in advance of your trip, there's a lot to fill out and you need to upload some documents. Then you fill out and submit your specific travel information no earlier than 3 days before your arrival. Note that current requirements can change, so visit the Canadian Border Services Agency before you go. Even with all this, you must still call in by phone on your arrival at a Canadian Customs port of entry. And of course, a passport is required. These call-in points that you actually have to get off your boat and go to their phone are located in Bedwell Harbor, Port of Sydney, Vancouver, and Victoria. Only the captain can leave the vessel before clearance is obtained via a phone call on a dedicated phone line at these points of entry. Return to the US is actually easier. Just download the CBP Roam app in advance, set up your information, and then submit it just after entering US waters. A customs agent will contact you by your phone through the app, possibly do a video inspection, and then clear you for re-entry. Otherwise, you'll have to visit a US Customs port of entry at either Roche Harbor, Friday Harbor, Anacortes, Port Angeles, or Point Roberts. Moving on, I want to emphasize a few safety considerations that we probably already practice, but become more important in a coastal or island cruising situation. Things like having an air horn or a foghorn, a cable cutter and a knife handy, a ditch kit. Know where your through holes are and how to plug them. Test your bilge pumps and have a bucket and a backup bilge pump on board just in case. Check out all of your equipment before beginning your voyage. Brief your crew on all these important things. Know how to use your VHF radio. Wear your PFD and let somebody know of your itinerary. I'm going to touch on a couple of important safety considerations that come into play, especially in the San Juan Islands. The first consideration, like sailing anywhere, is a knowledge of wind and weather conditions. We've already talked about being prepared with current and tide information, but wind and weather conditions can change quickly, just like in our mountain sailing environments here in Idaho. But they can have potentially bigger consequences in a coastal cruising situation. Practice reefing quickly and know where to duck into shelter if the wind comes up. Obtain a good wind forecast app like Windy or Predict Wind and learn how to use it well in advance. Review the wind and the weather forecast before setting sail for the day and make sure your forecast is current. Fog sometimes occurs in the San Juan Islands, though it usually burns off by mid-morning. There's little scarier than being fogged in on a passage across a shipping lane, as happened to me once. That is what precipitated my purchase of an AIS system. Get a good weather forecast, look at webcams, and be prepared to change your plans or your timing in the event of foggy conditions. The San Juan Islands are a busy place in the summer. There's a couple of things in the San Juan Islands that we don't see at our local Idaho sailing venues, including container ships, fast-moving ferries, towed barges, and never cut between the towboat and the barge. And if you're really lucky, a nuclear submarine. So, takeaway. We've covered a lot of material in this seminar, and I've stressed a lot of meticulous planning, highlighted a lot of hazards, and discussed a lot of dire events. But I want to leave you with what I think are the most important takeaways from this seminar. First and foremost is advanced preparation. Both you, your crew, and your vessel. Be super aware of currents and tides. Currents and tides, and respect them. Have a good navigation tool, know how to use it. And finally, flexibility is important. Don't let a schedule cause you to make bad decisions, and listen to your gut. If you and your boat are prepared, it's really all about having fun. So I'm going to show a few slides to end on a positive note.
Battery 100%.
Well, it's not about down to paradise. It's not home.
These are crabs. Rental buggies at Friday Harbor. A madrone tree. Barred owls. The rocks at Susha Island. That's my Admiral. Mount Baker. A great blue heron. And it took me 5 years, but an orca. More frequently seen, oysters. The lighthouse at Turn Point. Thank you. Okay, we have time for a few more questions. We'll start with the studio audience. Please stand up and be loud.
When you're cruising, do you prefer mooring balls or anchoring, or you do a combination of both? I see.
So the question is, when cruising, do I prefer mooring balls or anchoring? You know, if you're out for a long time, that 15 or 20 bucks can add up for a mooring ball. So if you know your weather's good and you know you're in a really protected place like Fossil Bay in Susha, you drop an anchor and it's free and you just dinghy over to shore and hike. So it's situation dependent. If you know that you're going to have strong winds, there's some comfort in being tied up to something more solid.
What you're showing us your navionics program and how it shows the currents with arrows. I assume that's real time that it's showing you.
Yeah, the question was, does navionics show currents in real time? And yes, they do. They're not always exact, which I have found. So I try to balance that with if you have a cell phone connection, which you frequently do in the San Juan Islands, I look at Deep Zoom, I look at navionics, and I look at that PNW current atlas. If all three of them are in agreement, I feel pretty good about it. Sometimes they're a little bit off, and that raises your hackles a little bit that you pay a little more attention.
On your safety equipment, I was just going to add that there is a list of required safety equipment, such as flares, and you should always check that before you go. Your flares, they will ticket you if you have expired flares that are too old. So make sure that you get the list for what you need on your boat and check to see that you have the pieces. I've never been boarded yet. Have you, Pete? Or?
No.
They do actually pull boats over and will board you while you're just for fun. I've been boarded.
The good comment. Thank you. The comment was, especially for the Zoom audience here that may not have heard that, there are required equipment, Coast Guard required equipment for vessels. Some of those kick in, I believe, at about 25 feet. The requirements vary depending on your boat length, but at a minimum, and again, this is not a seamanship seminar. We're hopefully all sailors, we need to be aware of what those Coast Guard requirements are. Make sure you have them. And a good point, flares expire, and some Coast Guard people can be pretty particular. So it's good to toe the line.
I think they allow electronics now. You don't have to have flares that expire.
Electronic flares?
Yeah.
So the question here was, do they allow electronic flares? And my comment is, I really don't know. They don't sound nearly as much fun as lighting off pyrotechnics. So I'm old school here. Sorry, Eric. I really don't know about electronic flares.
Yeah, that's what we went with when we went.
So two questions. Number one, with Navionics, there's an option to get Vision Plus with that. Have you? It's a more expensive tier. It's like 200 to 250 bucks a year. I was wondering if you had any experience with that, or if there would be any reason to go for that more expensive tier than what you've used in the past.
The question is, there's a couple of tiers of registration in Navionics, the second one being much more expensive than the $50. I never have felt the need to go beyond the $50. It's an amazing tool, and it gives me everything that I need to feel safe.
And then question number two, with a small outboard motor, as opposed to those big power cruisers, anything that you should pay attention to in terms of the size of that motor relative to the strength of the currents and tides? Yeah.
So the question here was the effectiveness of a small outboard motor on our pocket cruiser type sailboats. That's a real balance. Bigger, stronger motors are heavier, and weight is a detriment to a cruising sailboat. But you should talk to a reliable boat shop. My 25-foot boat, I have a 9.9 four-stroke on it. Way more power than I need, but there is comfort in cruising with that throttle just past the warm engine mark. And then when you really need it, you got more, but you pay for it with extra weight. So everything's a balance.
Overheated a motor twice in car.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, just totally went dead. That's not fun. So one thing I did was, on the deck of my boat, I have the phone number for Tow USA written.
Yeah, so the question and the comment is, if you have a small motor on your boat, make sure you have the phone number of Tow USA.
Well, the lady came out of Friday Harbor really fast and caught me.
With your experience, what's the best times of the year?
Well, best is relative, right? A lot of times in the summer, I typically spend like maybe late July and August, which is a fantastic time to be away from Boise, Idaho, when it's really hot here. But a lot of people say there's not much wind in the San Juans in that part of summer. And that's true. So if you do go, be prepared to motor, but just enjoy being in 75-degree temperatures and eating Dungeness crabs every night. And when the wind is there, we've had plenty of good sailing in July and August, but just maybe not every day.
Okay, so I feel really blessed that the San Juans are so close, us being in Boise, Idaho and stuff. Okay, my question is what's the shortest trip you've done? Like, it probably takes a day just to get, and then can you actually get there and set up in one day and leave the next morning?
Well, the question is, what's the shortest trip you could reasonably do, say, from Boise, Idaho? And it is a day to get there. And depending on the intricacies of your boat, my boat takes a long time to rig because of all the lines going aft to the cockpit, spinnaker halyards, spinnaker sheets, all this stuff. So, I would say a week is a minimum. But even so, I mean, if you can spend more time, if you get there and you spend 1 week, you'll be kicking yourself that you're turning around and going back. So let's see if we've got some questions from the chat room.
Okay, how much road do you put out at anchor to ensure the hook doesn't come?
So the question is, how much rode at anchor to ensure that when the tide comes up, you're not on too short of a scope? Well, that's simple math, and that is why, if you recall in the presentation, I showed each day what the high tide, what the low tide is, and when we're getting ready to set the hook, we'll pull that out and we'll say, what's the high tide today? What's the low? What time is it right now? Or are we kind of in the middle? What tide change do we expect to see? So the answer, of course, is you put out as much as you can. I feel mostly comfortable with 7-to-1 scope ratio, but in crowded anchorages, you may not be able to get away with that. And sometimes in a mixed field of mooring and anchorage, we've had to use a stern line while we were anchored so that we wouldn't swing into boats that were tied to mooring balls. So all situation dependent, and it's a problem in a crowded anchorage to get enough rode out to where you'll feel comfortable overnight.
Where do you purchase your paper charts?
Where do you purchase your paper charts? Anymore, those are printed pretty much on demand to keep up with updates. And there is I think Evergreen Pacific is one source, and there's several on the web. But make sure that you get them printed on demand.
Roche is no longer a point of entry?
Well, the question is, Roche Harbor still a point of entry? We were there last summer, and there was a call-in phone. There's not an actual customs agent there, but you can tie up to customs dock, go use the phone, and get clearance. Again, a lot of this stuff is dynamic. Things change. You used to have proof of vaccination to get into Canada. That's no longer required, but who knows down the road?
Comment that Navionics has great current data.
It's good to hear. Another comment that Navionics is good for current information.
What would you consider a minimum sale inventory for head sails that are hanged on?
That's a seamanship question. What would you consider a good inventory of sails for hank-on sails? I'd say just keep it simple, a big one and a small one.
I think this was earlier. How long can you stay at each park? So Washington Park had a minimum or a maximum of 10 days, I thought.
Yeah, there may, how long can you stay at each park? And, you know, I've never stayed there that long because you want to keep moving, but,
I saw recently 3 consecutive days on a mooring ball in Washington State Park.
okay, one of our participants in the studio audience actually used to volunteer at Washington State Parks, and he said he recalls a 3-day on a mooring ball before you might have to move. Well, we got one more.
Just a couple. We've done this 5 times, Bill, something like that, Canada and the US. We had a close encounter with a submarine, unintended. There's a nuclear sub going into a naval station, coming into Port Townsend. The US Navy has absolutely no sense of humor when you're getting too close to their submarines. And the story's a lot longer and more funny than that. But
So the comment here from some folks that have cruised in the San Juan and had an encounter with a nuclear submarine. The best thing, she said the Navy has no sense of humor about that, and I'm sure. And so the best thing to do is turn a 90-degree angle and go away from it.
50 caliber.
Yeah.
Was that right? They had a 50 caliber gun on their oh. The other thing.
They're not playing
Budget.
games.
Budget?
Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry.
I don't think she was done.
Oh, sorry.
I just wanted to say, Peter, you mentioned dogs, and we always take our dog. Every single place you go, dogs have to be on leashes, and it's a real pain. It's a huge pain.
So the comment was about taking your dog with you, and every place you go, dogs have to be on a leash. So just be advised of that.
What kind of anchors do you prefer in the San Juans?
You know, I only have a Danforth, and then I have a backup smaller Danforth, which everybody says that's not such a great anchor, but you know, I've never dragged. I've been in high winds. Most of the San Juans has good mud bottom holding. There's some places that have a lot of grass that's maybe not so good. But one of the reasons I keep the Danforth is that it fits into my anchor locker just perfectly. Not the best reason, but it's one of them.
I think we've had a,
Navionics to track boat movement while you're sleeping. That's the app you're using.
I didn't hear that.
that and sail safe.
Oh, anchor watches. Yeah, I use a set of track at Navionics when we turn in for the night. And then it's just, and you can turn it so it's always on, or you just touch your phone, look at it, and you know where you are, which actually I find to be much more effective than sticking your head out of the hatch in the middle of the night and looking around and go, well, I think this is where we started. And then I also use an audible anchor alarm like Sail Safe or Anchor Watch that sometimes wakes you up prematurely because of a bad GPS signal, but you know, it's pluses and minuses.
I think Steve had a question.
Here's a budgeting.
Okay, there was a question about budget. So, you know, that's your choice. I mean, you can go real cheap if you want to anchor every night and not pay for a mooring ball. And there's provisioning that's one thing we didn't talk about was provisioning. There's a good grocery store at Roche Harbor, Friday Harbor, of course, Anacortes, Cap Santa Marina. So you can reprovision frequently along the way. So you can go like backpack cheap, or you can go to some really fine restaurants in Roche Harbor or Friday Harbor and spend a lot of money.
Overnight parking charge on average, $10, 20, 50.
Yeah, I know the question was overnight parking charges for like say your rig and your trailer. I know at Deception Pass State Park it's $10 a night. Yeah.
Washington Park in Anacortes was $15 a night.
And another comment, Washington Park, which is a city or county park, I think, out of Anacortes, was $15 a night for parking. So again, that's part of trip planning. And Bellingham is free, right? Yeah, Bellingham is free. So part of the whole planning your trip to begin with is check into this, because you don't want to get there and find out you can't leave your vehicle, or it's going to cost you a lot more than you thought it was. Well, with that, thank you all for participating. For our Zoom folks, thank you for dialing in. I'm sure many of you Zoom folks I noticed live in Bellingham and Seattle area and have a lot of experience in the San Juans. I hope maybe you gleaned some things from my experiences. And for you Idaho cruisers that are anticipating a trip to the San Juans, do it, and you'll get hooked. It really is a beautiful place to sail, a lot of fun. So we are a group of sailors, and we happen to be right across the street from a tavern. So I suggest that we adjourn and walk across the street and maybe quench our thirst. Thank you very much.
There's a question about where will the presentation be available?
Say I'll send it out. Check idahosailing.org.